So you gather first. You gather these energies which have created you and keep you in this creation. You turn them back on themselves into your spine, then it comes up and you bring it to the point of the spiritual eye. So the second step is by the power of your will, augmented by that force you've gathered together in the sympathetic nervous system or the superficial spine. Those of you who had Kriya know what I'm talking about. What do? You push it in through the spiritual eye. Force it in through there. And then where does it go? It goes into the deep spine. That's where your soul resides. That's where your powers are. That's where your subtle powers are. Not in sensation, not in mind and intellect. Those are limited. The power of the soul is deep within yourself, in your spinal region, in the sushumna, in the deep spine. Now what happens there? Just like you put yeast in the bread, it goes all through, doesn't it? What do they call it? Leavens the bread. So when you put that energy into the deep spine where the soul resides, what does it do? It arouses the power of God at the base of the spine, the Kundalini power. It's sleeping there. It's in every one of us. It arouses it. Stimulates it a little bit, then it gets going. That's the law of God. It arouses it, and then it rises up the spine, and what's it do? It stimulates the centers of the spine, the places where God's energy is accumulated, and it finally stimulates the great center in the brain. That's why saints know more than ordinary people. That's why the saints are so strong in will, because they have aroused the divine will which is sleeping at the base of the spine, known as the Kundalini power. Now when that arouses, that enlivens the centers of the spine, finally the great center in the brain, and then you have aroused the divine will within you. Because divine will comes into us through the medulla center, we see it at this point, we contact it at this point, it is stored in the great thousand-rayed lotus of the brain. Now these are facts. You do not have to remember all the intricate facts, but that's what happens. Whether you do it consciously or not, when you turn your attention within and arouses the great divine energy, it comes to this point, and as Master says, you sail your consciousness through the spiritual eye into the omnipresence of God, which is right within yourself. As it says in Revelation, the kingdom of God is within man. It's right within the brain, and all things are there. It's right from here to the top of the head. That's where divine will is. When you won't find it out in sensation or mind or intellect, you'll find it right there. But you have to go there. And you have to follow someone who went there, as our beloved Master. So that is what steady will means. Steady will means to keep at it until you gather your energy. First, superficially. Secondly, you put it through the spiritual eye. If your mind is running all over the place and you're looking there, you're not doing anything. But if you concentrate at that point and use what will you have, then you arouse the greater will of the spine, the presence of God, known as the Kundalini power. Arousing that stimulates the centers of the spine where the presence of God lives and dwells. Being one with that, you feel His presence. You have superseded your human will with divine will. Master has said a wonderful thing in his little book, Metaphysical Meditation. Excuse me. Master said, better book, perhaps. In his book, the Master said, he says these wonderful words. It is your adamant will that will give you victory. Not a haphazard will, not a lazy will, a steady will. It is your adamant will that will give you victory. And he goes on, it is better to have a strong will than a perfect body. It is better to have a strong will than a perfect body. The more you emphasize the mortal, the more mortal you become. The more you emphasize the spirit, the more you will become spirit. And don't you see, by utilizing your will, not in outward things, we have to do that, we have to live, but utilizing your will more in the attaining of the presence of God, at this point you will become more spiritual. And as the Master says, it's better to have a strong spiritual will or a strong will, even if you have a weak body. What of it? If you have the presence of God, that's worth everything. Everything. You wouldn't swap it for anything. Realize this. Now, the men of the strongest will are who? Saints. saints. Why? Just as I have said, they have united their human will with God's will. They have aroused the Kundalini power within them, and they have aroused the spiritual centers within them so that their human will is divine will. That's all. And you know the Master said, a saint is what? A sinner who didn't give up. He didn't stop trying. He didn't stop meditating. He meditated more, as the Master, as we read in his little story, that he meditated, what was it, 2 days? Do we do that? Well, a little while, morning and night, we're lucky. But even with that much, you can supersede your human will with the presence of divine will within you. Now, oh yes, I have a little story here. You're all familiar with the frog story, aren't you? Where the frogs fell head over heels into the pail of milk. 2 of them, one little one and one big one. And so they began to paddle. They couldn't jump out over, but they had to keep going. And so finally the big fellow, he gave up easily. He didn't have steady will. He was just an ordinary frog, I guess, only big. So he gave up and drowned in the milk. But the little fellow kept on. He says, as the Master says, it's better to have a strong will even though you have a weak body. So he said, I'll keep on. And he kept on paddling. Finally he felt a little something under his little feet. And a little butter had formed, so he got the solid foundation and jumped to freedom. So realize that. I think the story is something like that, and near enough anyway. And so, even though you're small and weak, keep at it. God will never let you go. God will never let you drown in the milk of delusion, so to speak. He will keep you steadfast, even if you have a weak body, if you keep at it and do not lose faith in Him. But if you give Him up, what can He do? He's given us free will. So realize we must everlastingly keep at it like the little frog.